it's broadcasting. Oh, oops. Okay, seems to be going smooth so far. Let's continue. Alright, so there's like a dude up there.
Russ, these guys have automatic weapons.
They're alien commandos. Of course they have automatic weapons. We'd have them too, but Combine weapons are gene-coded, so out of luck. Unless you find one that's unbonded, or you're open to some minor genetic modification.
I'm good, Russ. I'm just gonna roll with these genes that I've got.
We always introduce new enemies at a distance, and never while the player is under duress. Here, the player is able to observe the Combine soldiers killing some wandering zombies, giving the player an idea of how powerful the soldiers are, and how they might operate in combat. We located the Combine far enough away that it was plausible that they would not notice the player, but close enough that the player could choose to engage, but remain relatively safe from return fire.
Said my tracking was last. Oh, that's weird. Okay, we're back. Hey, there's the... No, it's not. Wonder if the light in the kitchen is on because that usually bugs out. It's fine, man. At least. Sort of. Oh, shit. Same place. Just fight these guys from up here. Are they coming up here? Oh shit, someplace. Damn, I'm just under the shotgun. Oh, let's see what's on the pistol. Burst fire. I don't even use that, so I'm not even gonna get it. Yeah, screw it. Let's keep going. Is there more? You know, what about this thing? Oh, come on. Stealth experience. Extreme panic, he says. Hostile is experiencing extreme panic. It was kind of weird. She wasn't wrong about that. Gotta get low to the right. Yeah, still got some. Oh, shit.
Fairview Junction! We're here! This is it! Get down!
Squad's Soldier AI has been a mainstay of the Half-Life series, so we were excited to see how their design would be impacted by the move to VR. Our early playtesting against the Half-Life 2 Combine Soldier AI in VR immediately made a number of things clear. First, players did not like to be shot at, and often had a visceral negative response. The soldiers frequently ran at players at full speed, firing all the while, and we discovered that the speed of Half-Life 2 combat was simply too overwhelming in VR. Also, players took longer to do everything in VR, especially the core action of spotting and aiming their weapon at an enemy while staying in cover. As a result, the soldiers tended to live much longer in VR than they did in Half-Life 2. It was clear from these early playtests that the most common reaction among players was to immediately seek cover from enemy fire. So we started experimenting with changes to the Soldier AI, aimed at building a combat experience around players' tendency to seek cover. Early experiments were focused on keeping Combine soldiers at a comfortable distance from the player, while keeping them moving around enough to not have combat become too static. To create lulls in firing for players to peek out from cover, we prevented soldiers from shooting while on the run in most cases. To keep players from remaining stationary, we created a concept of flushing, where squads will attempt to flush the player out of cover, and we gave each class of soldier a different method of flushing out the player. But even in these early tests, it was also clear that players weren't capable of fighting soldiers until they'd gotten skilled in a number of basic combat actions, like reloading their gun without having to focus all their attention on it. So we were careful to slowly introduce the various types of soldiers, and even individual features within the soldier classes. For example, these early fights against Combine soldiers only feature the basic grunts, and these particular grunts don't to flush a player out of cover. We found it was important in these first fights to give players all the time they need to learn to use cover effectively, before we start introducing enemies that could try and flush them out.
Oh, I think that's the last of them.
Good, because we don't have much time.
That was my hand vibrating, so that was weird. trust him. That's all. Right, yes, it is. Through here. It's back here. What's this? Whoa. Skip the
There's a control station override nearby. You should have plenty of time to get the override back online.
Oh, I already did it? Shit. I'm sitting there thinking I didn't do it.
Alright, I'll be able to stop the train right here.
You sure you can do that?
Absolutely. You just need to activate the terminal.
Nice.
Then you'll need to be ready for a fight. They're not going to give up your dad easily.
I'll be ready.
Right, that's the terminal there.
I'm on it.
Do hurry though.
Gimme, gimme, gimme. Okay. Let's try this. Oh boy. There's missing one. Let's fuck what's in here. What's that noise? Why did the music do that? Oh. It's empty. Okay. Doors are reopened. Here we go.
Okay, no worries. But the train is coming. Just get me in. It'll only take a second. You're doing great.
Yep, doing great. No worries. 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 Worries.
Okay, now just re-engage the system.
Is it supposed to come off?
It's the opposite of what it's supposed to do, Alyx.
What do I do? What do I do now?
Well, don't panic. Well, stop panicking if you
I'm not
are.
panicking.
Yes, but I am. We need to find another way to stop this train.
There's gotta be another way to stop this train.
Well, start looking. We don't have much time. 10 seconds, Alyx. Okay, just throw the switch there.
At this point in the game, we needed a big set piece, a non-combat moment to reward players for fighting their way through the dark, scary tunnels. Not only that, but the pace of the story was leading up to its most important moment thus far, the rescue of Eli Vance. Crashing the Combine prison train that was transporting Eli felt like the exact right thing to accomplish these goals, and it gave us the opportunity to create some VR spectacle. We wanted to achieve the cinematic chaos of causing a train wreck, while giving the players an active role in the event.
Fuck, man. Is it gonna talk while I'm crashing the train? I think so.
There's gotta be another way to stop this train.
Well, start looking. We don't have much time. 10 seconds, Alyx.
At this point in the game, we needed a big set piece, a non-combat moment to reward players for fighting their way through the dark, scary tunnels. Not only that, but the pace of the story was leading up to its most important moment thus far, the rescue of Eli Vance. Crashing the Combine prison train that was transporting Eli felt like the exact right thing to accomplish these goals, and it gave us the opportunity to create some VR spectacle. We wanted to achieve the cinematic chaos of causing a train wreck, while giving the players an active role in the event. Our first attempts to design the scenario were a challenge. It turned out that directing the players' attention wasn't as simple as ensuring they were in the right position through gameplay. In our initial tests, players frequently failed to see some or all of the spectacular train wreck. The crash was one of the first destruction sequences we put into the game, so we had a lot to learn about player behavior in VR and how to direct the player naturally to immerse them in the chaos.
Okay.
On top of that, to continually hit our target frame rate, we needed to create a cascading series of events, so that only some of the destruction was happening at any given time. Sound design, level design, effects, and animation had to be carefully coordinated to lead the player's attention through each stage of the wreck. For example, at the start of the crash, we used the sounds of train cars piling up in the distance, encouraging players to look in that direction before one of the train cars lifts up and blasts through the concrete connector. At the end of the sequence, the smokestack collapse is used to direct the player's attention to their eventual path forward, and we wanted players to witness its destruction. Before bringing down the smokestack, we gave players a brief moment of rest, and, again, used sound to draw their attention to the smokestack. Initially, we used a rumbling sound preceding its collapse, but we found this to be too subtle in practice, and instead added the transient explosion sound, which drew the player's attention towards the smokestack more reliably.
What the hell are those?
I don't know. But we need to find Dad.
Yeah, no, I know. I've just never seen those before. That's your dad's prisoner pod.
Oh my god. Where's Dad? 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 Dad!
I'm over here, honey. I need help. Hurry.
Okay. I'm gonna to reach out and pull you up.
For the rescue of Eli, we wanted to create a tense, just out of reach moment where the player physically saves him. But for the rest of the story to work, Alyx and Eli had to take different paths at the end of the scene. We tried a few different approaches, including a version where Eli was hanging from a ledge just in front of the player, and the player could reach down to attempt to grab Eli's hand to pull him up. In practice, however, players' hands would collide with the real-world floor. Not only did this make it impossible to reach Eli, it took players out of the moment, wrecking the emotion of the scene. Since Eli and Alyx had to take different paths, we tried an approach where Alyx rescued Eli, but he was injured and couldn't proceed. Unfortunately, many players would stick around, not wanting to abandon him. Eventually, we arrived at the solution that shipped in the final product. Separating Eli from the player with the Vortigaunt's rescue made for a much more meaningful return and fulfillment of the Vortigaunt's promise to help Alyx. The datapod that Eli found was an addition that not only let us integrate Eli back into the story later, but also gave him something to do, so there was a much stronger reason why he would not accompany the player on their journey going forward.
Alyx Vance, I have come to help, as I said I would.
Thank you! Thank you. Just stay there. I'm gonna figure out how to get over to you.
No! Alyx, listen. The thing Russell and I found is some sort of super weapon.
A super weapon?
It's something big. They got it here in the QZ in some kind of vault. But they're about to move it. Where, I don't know, but it's gonna be soon.
Then we gotta steal it before they do.
Yes! And look. I managed to pocket this Combine data pod. If I can decrypt it, we can figure out how to use their weapon against them.
So what's the plan?
You head to the vault. I'll take this thing back to Russell's and get to work.
Wait, where is the vault?
Dad, where's the vault?
Look to the northern star.
Yes. Look to the star. Got it. Dad?
It's right in the middle of the QZ, and it's big. Get above ground and see what you can find.
I will accompany you to Eli Vance and ensure his safety.
Great. Thank you. Dad, I'm gonna go find this vault.
Go! Stay safe, baby. I love you.
I love you too.
I love you too.
Thank you.
Did you see that?
Hey, Russ.
Bunch of bullshit.
Keep an eye out for Dad, okay?
I'll let you know if he gets here. When he gets here.
Tracking all the fucked up right there. I don't even know if I'm still streaming. I think I am. I better look. Give me a second. What button do I push? Oh yeah. This one.
You know, it got a bit messy back there, but we did get Dad back.
Yeah.
What?
That's probably gonna draw some attention. Not probably, actually. It's definitely drawing attention. Look, they're looking for you now, okay? So just be careful. You know, if we can get this weapon, we could change things forever.
Yeah. If.
Look, I know we've only been working together for a few hours now, but I want you to know I'm proud of you. Okay, you're under a lot of pressure here.
Wow. Russ.
So much pressure, in fact, that I hesitate to even bring it up. But I did notice that when you reached out for your father's hand, had he actually grabbed it, his grip would have crushed all the delicate sensors in the Russells.
Ah. Okay.
Totally understandable, and would have been worth it, by the way, in this case.
Right.
Having said that, I have a hard time imagining another situation where that would have been the case. And much like your father, the Russells are priceless. Okay, so just, moving forward.
Russ, I promise your gloves are safe with me.
I'm still pissed that the Guardian messed up. I don't even know what it looked like on the stream. It probably got all fucked up. You mean the... Yeah, did it show like... It still showed like... what was happening? Yeah, okay, cool. That's good though. Damn this fucking crap. Come on, buddy. How much? Oh. You know, I went through part of this game
Last 4 shells.
not knowing that you can load that many shells into the shotgun. For a while, I thought it was only just 2. Then I'm like, oh shit, you can load like 7 in there. Fuck. Now here's a code. We'll take it and we'll swipe right here. And it don't work, so we go back and we swipe this one. Level 3, and that's level 3, so this probably isn't gonna work, but whatever. Oh. That's weird. No crowbar.
Early on in the project, we spent some time experimenting with the classic Half-Life crowbar. Playtests showed us that it was an interesting tool for our player to use in puzzles and world interactions. We weren't very happy with how our melee combat efforts turned out. We felt it was really important that the crowbar was solid to the world and enemies, and that resulted in some tricky physics challenges. Players could easily push the crowbar into an enemy in front of them, because nothing in the real world would stop it. Indeed, without that real-world physical feedback, we found playtesters exhibited a wide variety of swing behaviors. Some would waggle the controller rapidly,
about this weapon.
Well, when it comes to
others
combine
would put their
data
whole body
encryption,
into it.
You're my
Eli,
guy.
At the same time, playtest response to our pistol prototype was very positive, especially around the more complex reloading mechanics.
might as well be
Faced with a
an
potentially significant R&D problem in melee combat, we chose to refocus our efforts on ranged combat. It also didn't help that players all associated the crowbar with Gordon Freeman, not Alyx Vance.
So the crowbar was originally going to be in here. They took it out for logistical purposes. Very interesting. Which one? This one?
Alyx, look out the window.
Holy crap. That's gotta be the vault.
Yeah. Your dad didn't mention it was floating.
So even if we make it there, we still have to get up to it.
Oh, the cables! Look at all the cables attached to it. All we have to do is follow them.
And break whatever's at the other end.
And down comes the vault. Simple. Easy to follow. Yeah, I like this plan.
This entire section of the map, from the start of the keycard puzzle up to this room, was added specifically to show the player the vault on its own. Without this little detour, players would otherwise have their first view of the vault at the entrance to the Northern Star Hotel, which was also when they would see their first Combine substation. So much new information all at once led many players to confuse the vault with the substation, or just miss it entirely, so we created this area of the train station to highlight the vault on its own. Even though players are required to enter this room to get the second keycard, they still wouldn't necessarily notice the vault outside, so we added some dialogue with Russell about looking out the window to see it. This may be a bit heavy-handed, but it was necessary to solve the problem of players not recognizing the vault when they saw it later in the game.
Do here, just go back. Oh. Yeah, just go back with the key card.
Have you heard any Combine chatter about Dad escaping?
No, nothing. It's all about sending reinforcements into the quarantine zone.
On the plus side, that means Dad is still on his way back to you. We'd have heard if they recaptured Eli Vance.
And on the downside...
Getting to the vault isn't going to get any easier.
Shoddy. I got a shotgun.
Ooh, grenades. Total waste of grenade.
Worth it.
Agreed. Heads up, zombie. Ciao.
Grenades are pretty cool. As long as you throw them right. Grenades are great. As you throw them throwing. That's a hard one.
Although it may seem obvious that throwing would be a trivial interaction to support in VR, a lot of nuanced work is required to get it to feel right. And if we were going to build puzzles like this one, where the player must throw an armed grenade through a high duct, throwing needed to work well. A typical VR game running at 90 frames per second will read the sensor data from the track controllers once per frame. This means the data is read every 11 milliseconds. That may seem like a short time step, but when throwing, a user can easily move their hand 15 centimeters or more in that amount of time. Additionally, the player may release the object by opening their hand or releasing the trigger at any point during their throwing motion. This makes reconstructing the act of throwing a virtual object an interesting signal processing problem. It's up to any given piece of VR software to derive the player's intent from the discretely sampled controller data, and we've learned a lot over the years about what works and what doesn't. In the lab, which we shipped in 2016, we sampled the controller's positional data every 11 milliseconds and used the sampled positions to compute the controller velocity at each time step. We then used an average of the computed velocity and direction over several frames before and after the object release to determine the velocity and direction to apply to the thrown object. Although this was functional enough to ship, it didn't always feel consistent, especially if the game's frame rate ever fell below 90 frames per second. Later, in the Index controller tech demo Moondust, we expanded on this algorithm by biasing towards higher velocity data. We also extended the SteamVR software interface to provide the controller's instantaneous velocity and acceleration data from the hardware inertial measurement unit, which is computed on the controller every 2 milliseconds. This meant that we did not have to calculate an estimate from the positions sampled by the engine only every 11 milliseconds as we had done on the lab. This was crucial to providing a more responsive feel, as it meant the throwing calculations were no longer tied to the rendering frame rate. After further experimentation, we arrived at the solution used in Half-Life Alyx, which takes 10 frames that preceded the release of the held object and averages the 3 frames bracketing the peak controller velocity in that time window. We have found that this tends to lead to a better approximation of precisely when the player intended to release the thrown object. This approach resulted in consistent, comfortable throwing, enabling us to rely on players being able to accurately throw grenades, or any other objects, with confidence.
Yes.
Nice throw.
I had so much trouble the first time doing that. Second time, no problem.
Hey, on the monitor, Combine.
I see him.
Overwatch acknowledges activity. Confirm Sector 02. Possible necrotic interference. Sub-sector River Command Project.
This one's weird. Auto loader.
Combine do know how to upgrade a gun, I'll give him that.
Oh man. What the fuck?
Lester,
That's cool. Would you start coming over here? These guys are kind of tough. Take this with me. There's probably a health station around the corner. Maybe not.
This optional toner puzzle is intended to train players not to blindly click on each junction without first understanding the implications. This particular puzzle is designed to have the side effect of tripping a fire alarm if the player merely clicks on each toner junction they encounter without looking ahead. An observant player can easily solve the puzzle without tripping the alarm, but a careless player will trip the alarm, causing a Combine soldier to come storming around the corner to investigate the noise.
Look to the northern star.
I am? Why are you saying it like that?
No. The Vortigaunt said, look to the northern star to help his friends, which sounds like Vortigaunt nonsense, but I guess it isn't.
Oh, yeah. That does make more sense. That's some sort of combined substation. They usually generate power and host security protocols.
Like the power and security you need for a giant vault.
Typical players spend up to 2 hours progressing through the interior spaces of the Northern Star Hotel, and we found in playtests that they often had trouble remembering their next goal of disrupting the Combine substation above. In earlier tests, the vault constantly reminded players of its presence by emitting a repeating abstract musical pattern. This pattern works so well at drawing and keeping the player's attention that we expanded and fictionalized it as a semi-musical sound design pattern, which we changed to emit from the Combine substation, representing it collecting and transmitting Vortigaunt energy to the vault. While in the hotel, the player does not have line of sight to the substation, so we repeat this sonic pattern at varying volumes within the hotel as a reminder of both the Combine substation and the vault outside. In fact, if you look closely at the Zen foliage when you are in the hotel, you will notice that it reacts visibly to the overspill of Vortigaunt energy as it flows from the substation.
Three shells left.
Let's go one down. That was weird.
And the power's out. Looks like we're taking the stairs. And the stairs are out.
Let's try and get that power back on.
We knew from previous VR projects that players would expect a high level of fidelity from their interactions with objects in the world, and during early testing of Half-Life Alyx, we received comments that objects were not making the sounds that players expected, given an object's material, size, and assumed weight. This led us to a more granular approach to physics sounds than we had used in prior products. For example, in the past, we would have used a single physics sound for all objects of a certain size and material. So, we would have had one sound to represent collisions of small metal objects, another sound for large wooden objects, and so on. For Half-Life Alyx, we built up a new library of object-specific sounds so that we could distinguish between similar objects, like a piece of silverware and a small metal can. Not only do we now have a library of almost 2,000 object-specific physics sounds, covering over 160 different objects, but we can further alter the sound at runtime based on an object's impact velocity and the hardness of the material it collides with. In some cases, we even layer in sounds representing an object's contents, such as matches in a matchbox or fuel in a jerry can, which can be heard when those objects are shaken by the player or collide with something at high velocity.
Given the large number of bottles throughout the game, and the fact that they feature so significantly in the distillery gameplay, we decided to make interacting with them as interesting as possible using a procedural liquid effect. Each bottle is assigned a random fill level, and values for the amount of liquid agitation and foaming are calculated based on the bottle's movement. This is stored in the object's tint colour, which is otherwise unused. The shader calculates the liquid level based on the bottle's orientation in game. Since the amount of liquid visible in a bottle as a proportion of its height is different when oriented upright, sideways or upside down, different values are used for each in order to preserve the apparent volume of liquid inside. The liquid's surface is then displaced by a number of sine waves, modulated with the agitation value to create rippling waves. The areas determined to contain liquid, as opposed to air, take on the colour and refraction index values of that liquid. Bubbles and foam effects are added based on the agitation and foaming values. These are procedural and can be modified to create a variety of different behaviours. Several layers of bubbles are created in a local view space relative to the object, so that they're stable from frame to frame and can always move upwards relative to gravity. Artists can set a variety of parameters per liquid, such as colour, glow, foaming potential, wave properties, and a meniscus at the surface of the liquid which curls up around the edges of the volume, helping to communicate the viscosity of the liquid. The refracted environment seen through the glass and liquid is sampled from the same cubic environment map of the local area that's used for reflections, and so the bottles are effectively opaque and do not have to blend with the frame buffer in the way that transparent objects normally do. This was a strategic design choice, as along with storing the physics data in the tint colour, it means that the bottles can be rendered together as a batch in arbitrary order, which is critical for graphics throughput. In the end, the refractive liquid effect allows for a variety of interactions to take place at a fidelity that is especially compelling with tracked hand controllers in VR.
Here we go.
This hotel's ancient. The wiring's gonna be a real rat's nest.
Power's back on. Let's check the elevator. Boom. Power back on. And up we... This place is overgrown. How dangerous do we think this stuff really is?
Well, it is spores from another dimension, so probably... yeah, extremely. But a rare opportunity to examine alien flora up close.
Two shells left.
The Zen flora in this area animate in response to the Vortigaunt energy pulsing from the Combine substation outside. Since the substation itself is not visible from inside the hotel, it was important that we continue to remind players of its presence using audio and visual cues, and the Zen flora provided a perfect opportunity to do this. The shaders used on the Zen flora help illustrate the plant's response to the energy pulses in a few different ways. For example, the villi and cilia elongate and vibrate, while many of the other plants pulsate or glow. The intensity and timing of these effects are driven directly by the sound system, meaning that the audio and visual reinforcement of the Combine substation pulses are always in sync.
already starting to think I shouldn't be breathing this stuff.
Agreed. Just keep moving. Maybe breathe less.
Breaching the quarantine zone revealed a new hidden secret of the city. Alien plant life from Zen has taken root on Earth and has been thriving in the shadows of City 17. On the development team, the Northern Star Hotel was referred to as Hotel Zen before it had a proper name in the story, as it was the first location we used to explore what Zen foliage could look like and how it might consume any given environment. One of the challenges the environment team faced when designing the Zen foliage was layering a new look onto an existing environment without having to rebuild Zen-infested versions of every prop. We relied heavily on texture blending and kit bashing of Zen foliage shapes to handle most of the big environmental changes when Zenifying a scene. We also added some new features to our level editor, Hammer, which allowed for more creative manipulation of assets to reduce repetition. For example, we could pose certain types of meshes such as the Zen tentacles. These could be placed, scaled, stretched and manipulated to snake through an environment, giving a handcrafted look without every asset having to be built for a specific location. These elements were editable in Hammer so they could be adjusted at any time, but were baked into static meshes when the map was compiled to improve their runtime performance.
Gotcha. Oh, that's not good. See that? Russell? Russell!
Alyx, come and listen.
The Reviver, one of the new enemy types introduced in Half-Life Alyx, arose from our observation that playtesters enjoyed searching their environment in VR much more than they had in traditional games. In addition to rewarding that desire to search with ammunition and resin, we experimented with how it could be part of fighting an enemy. We began prototyping with a fast headcrab variant we called the Runner, modifying its behaviour to run away and hide from the player after it attacked. We found players really enjoyed looking for a small, hidden enemy they knew was somewhere within a dense environment. They also liked shooting at a fast-moving enemy that was able to run under and behind everyday objects like tables and chairs. Lastly, players talked about liking the way they got to be the aggressor in combat for once, since everywhere else in the game they felt like they were always on the defensive. While feedback was overall very positive, there was one specific problem: how to encourage players to search for the Runner. After a few Runner encounters, we found players would start to realise they didn't have to look for the Runner at all, they could simply wait for it to run away and then leave the room. So we started prototyping various ways in which the Runner could become more dangerous if not found, setting up a time pressure where players had to find the Runner quickly or the situation would get worse. After some experimentation, we landed on the prototype where the Runner could revive a fallen zombie and become a new kind of foe, one that was more dangerous than a Runner or zombie. After this change, the Runner was renamed internally to the Reviver, and we began assembling the various encounters around it. It took a lot of playtesting to balance out all the various elements of the Reviver fights, because they involved multiple separate stages: combat versus the Reviver, searching for a hidden Reviver, and combat versus a revived zombie. In the end, we still didn't feel like we'd created enough of a foolproof reason for players to need to search for hidden Revivers, so we turned the Reviver's heart into a key, requiring players to collect it.
An enemy's animation can elicit a powerful emotional response from players, especially in VR. While developing the Reviver, we learned that sometimes a character performance can have unintended consequences. In our initial Reviver prototypes, we simply used a blue-tinted headcrab model with rudimentary electrical effects. The prototype was successful enough in playtesting that we decided to invest in a new, purpose-built model for the Reviver, with electrical skin and improved effects. Players identified the new Reviver successfully in the game, but we ran into a new problem. Players didn't want to fight it anymore. While the blue headcrab was easily identified as something dangerous, the new model was something that players had to evaluate from scratch, and they didn't necessarily see it as threatening. In fact, the animations authored for the new Reviver model were interpreted by many players as friendly or even cute. Players would often approach the creature to try to pet it, or worse, refuse to kill it to retrieve the required puzzle piece, blocking their progression in the game. If they did then realize that they were going to have to kill the cute creature to proceed, they felt horrible having to go through with it. To fix this, we reauthored most of the Reviver's animations, making it significantly more unsettling and menacing. We also made the Reviver more aggressive by adding a jump attack if the player got too close. With these changes to animation and behavior, players once again were fighting the Reviver as intended, and they no longer wanted to take it home as a pet.
This is the room featured in the very first shot of the Half-Life Alyx announcement trailer. It's not an obvious choice for that use. The room is dark, not particularly colorful, and it's a pretty pedestrian corridor. Cleaning supplies and laundry baskets are not in themselves attention grabbers. But we chose this scenario because it very effectively demonstrates the excitement and tension that we thought was typical of the game. All game trailers require careful design. Conveying a game's core experience in just a few moments is tricky, even at the best of times. But we believe the Half-Life Alyx trailer had to work harder than most to meet a particularly difficult and uncommon set of challenges. We had kept the existence of the game under wraps, so shipping the trailer was going to be the first time in 13 years that Valve had shown any work on Half-Life. On top of that, the trailer had to quickly communicate that Valve had chosen to make the next installment of Half-Life a VR game. And although we were very confident in the decision to make a VR game and in the quality of what we had built, we still worried that revealing those decisions to the world might cause even our most loyal fans to make their own decision, that we had truly lost our minds. Those of us working on the trailer knew it had to make people so excited that they could put those worries aside. The trailer also had to clearly convey that the game was not Half-Life 3, meaning that it did not take place after the events of Episode 2. Half-Life Alyx was instead a prequel of sorts, occurring between the events of Half-Life and Half-Life 2. In addition, the trailer had to show depth, variety, familiar characters, and enough novelty and surprise to get across to the viewer that this was really and truly a full-fledged installment in the Half-Life series, not a small VR experiment or a spin-off. This was a tall order, but the entire game team rallied around the effort because everyone understood the value of the work. We're just as proud of the result we achieved in the trailer as we are of any other part of Half-Life Alyx.
Few shells left.